As she sat alone at the edge of the schoolyard, Nora felt the world shift around her. It started as a faint hum, something beneath her senses, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. She blinked hard, as if that would reset her senses. But it didn't. The moment stretched, and the world around her went out of focus. The colors, sounds, and smells all softened until she felt herself suspended somewhere in between. It was disorienting, like a dream too vivid to shake. Her stomach dropped with an unfamiliar weight, and for a split second, the space around her felt different, a space that felt like it had always existed yet was suddenly foreign. She felt something tugging her back, pulling her towards solid ground. And just like that, she was back. The ordinary world resumed around her as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't just fallen into a different place that didn't quite fit. "Did you see that?" she whispered, barely loud enough for herself to hear. Nora looked around to see if anyone else had noticed, if anyone's gaze held a spark of understanding. But there was no one, only the humdrum of the schoolyard, people absorbed in their own lives, unaware of the strange currents she felt just beneath the surface of their shared reality. But she knew it hadn't been her imagination. It had been too real, too tangible to dismiss. Days passed, each one echoing with the strange sensation she couldn't shake. It happened again, and then again, each time a little longer, a little deeper. She started carrying a small notebook to document each instance, each subtle tug between realities, as if writing it down would make it more concrete, more real to her. Each shift left her exhausted, drained in ways she couldn't explain. Sleep didn't help, neither did distractions. Her friends were beginning to notice. She would drift off mid-sentence, lose track of conversations, and sometimes stare so intensely into the distance that someone had to nudge her to bring her back. Earth to Nora. Her friend Mia waved a hand in front of her face one day in the cafeteria. "What?" "Sorry," Nora mumbled, blinking herself back to the moment. "You've been weird lately. Is everything okay?" Mia's concern was genuine, her eyes full of that rare kind of friend who actually listened, who actually wanted to know. "It's nothing. I don't think you'd believe me if I told you," Nora replied, her voice a little shaky. "Try me. I mean, you don't have to pretend everything's fine if it's not." Nora looked down, hesitating. How could she explain the way reality seemed to be loosening its grip on her? How could she put into words the spaces she saw, the ones that existed in the gaps between moments, in the places just out of sight? "Sometimes it feels like I'm somewhere else," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Like, everything around me gets fuzzy, and I feel like I'm slipping. I don't know, out of phase with this world." Mia was silent for a moment, her face unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. "That's interesting. Kind of like a daydream." "No, it's more than that. I feel like I don't know, seeing things other people can't." As Mia processed Nora's words, her eyes sparkled with curiosity rather than doubt. "What do you mean, seeing things? Like ghosts?" "Not exactly," Nora replied. "It's like, there's this hidden world just behind everything. I can feel it pulling at me, like I'm caught between two layers." "Whoa." Mia leaned in, lowering her voice. "That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie." "Yeah, but it's real. At least, I think it is." Nora's voice grew softer, her gaze distant. "Sometimes it feels like I'm stepping into a different version of this world, one that no one else can see." As the days went on, the sensation only intensified. Nora tried everything she could think of to stay grounded, music, running, even meditation, but nothing could anchor her when the shift happened. It felt as though she was being pulled into a dimension just adjacent to this one, where the colors were brighter, sounds sharper, and strange symbols seemed to appear on walls, glowing faintly like hidden runes. Her visions became stronger, too, forming patterns she couldn't ignore. She'd see the same symbols again and again, etched faintly in her notebooks, in reflections, and even in her dreams. Symbols she somehow understood instinctively but couldn't explain, each one whispering secrets in a language only her heart could understand. One evening, after another disorienting episode, Nora found herself wandering alone to an abandoned lot behind her school. The lot was overgrown, with rusted fences and broken bricks scattered around like ruins of a forgotten age. The setting sun cast everything in a fiery glow, painting the abandoned structures in an eerie light. This time, she knew something was different. The pull was stronger here, more insistent. Her fingers tingled as she reached out, almost involuntarily, to touch the air itself. It felt thick, like trying to push her hand through molasses. The moment her fingers breached it, a soft, pulsating hum filled her ears. Then, a figure appeared in the corner of her vision. It was a boy, around her age, with wild hair and eyes that held the same otherworldly glow she'd seen in her visions. He looked at her intently, as if he'd been waiting for her. "Who are you?" Nora asked, feeling a surge of both fear and familiarity. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, his voice soft but weighted with meaning. "But I think we both know what you are, Nora." "What I am?" she repeated, heart racing. "I'm just, me." He shook his head, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're a traveler. One who can walk between worlds." Nora's mind spun with the weight of his words. A traveler? Walk between worlds? The idea thrilled her, but it also terrified her. "If that's true, why can't I control it?" "Because you're new to it," he said simply. "You've been slipping between phases without understanding the rules. But with practice, you could do much more than just visit." "Visit?" she asked, confusion lacing her voice. "You mean, these worlds, they're real?" "As real as ours," he replied. "They exist parallel to us, invisible to most, but accessible to those who can phase. Some people go their whole lives without ever seeing it. Others, like you, get pulled in and can't ignore it. You're sensitive to the phases, Nora." "Sensitive?" She half laughed, half sighed. "Feels more like a curse than a gift." "Trust me," he said, stepping closer, his gaze steady. "It's both. But you're not alone. There are others who felt the pull. Travelers from different places, different times. It's dangerous, though. Each phase has its own inhabitants, its own rules. Some aren't so friendly." Her skin prickled at his words. "Inhabitants?" He nodded. "Entities that live in these other layers. Some are benign, but others, they don't take kindly to intruders." A chill ran down Nora's spine. "So, what do I do?" He studied her, eyes flickering with a depth beyond his years. "You learn to control it. Otherwise, the phases will keep pulling at you, deeper and deeper, until you lose your grip on this world." "How?" "I'll show you," he replied. "Meet me here tomorrow night. There's more to learn, but it's not safe during the day. They can sense us better then." With that, he turned and disappeared, leaving her standing in the twilight, heart pounding with equal parts fear and excitement. The next night, Nora felt her nerves creeping up as she slipped out of her house and made her way back to the abandoned lot. The darkness seemed thicker than usual, pressing down on her as if the air itself knew she was there for something unusual. She spotted the boy right away, standing exactly where she had left him, his silhouette stark against the faint glow of the setting moon. "Glad you came back," he said with a nod. "We don't have much time." She moved closer, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "You still haven't told me your name." He looked at her, a trace of something almost like regret crossing his face. "Names are tricky when you're a traveler. But you can call me Finn." "Finn," she repeated, committing it to memory. It sounded both familiar and strange, as if she'd heard it whispered before in one of her visions. "So, what now?" "First, I need you to understand that crossing phases is like pulling on a thread in a giant tapestry. Every time you move between them, you leave a trace, something other beings can follow. It's like they can smell you," he explained, voice low. "That's why we have to be careful. The entities in these other layers don't welcome intruders." "Then why even go there?" she asked, her pulse quickening with unease. "Because sometimes you don't have a choice. And sometimes," he hesitated, "you have to go looking for something." "Like what?" She could sense there was something deeper behind his words, a mystery she wasn't sure she was ready to uncover. He glanced away, his jaw tightening as he weighed his answer. "Answers," he said finally. "Things that our world can't explain. And some of us have questions that need answers from elsewhere." The silence that followed felt heavier than the night itself. She didn't know if it was the mystery of Finn's past, or the curiosity gnawing at her, but something pushed her to keep going, to find out more. How do I control it? She asked, breaking the silence. Finn nodded approvingly. We'll start with something simple. Take a deep breath and focus on the air around you. Imagine it thickening, slowing down, almost like water. Nora closed her eyes and concentrated, letting the sounds of the world fade into the background. She felt a subtle shift, as if the ground beneath her was softer, less solid. The sensation spread through her body like a shiver, and for a moment, she felt weightless, suspended in some in-between space. Good, Finn's voice reached her, distant and muffled. Now, imagine yourself sinking into that space. Don't resist it, just let it happen. Following his instructions, she let herself drift, surrendering to the feeling. The air seemed to part around her, and she sensed a shift in the energy around them. She opened her eyes and gasped. Everything was slightly off. Colors had shifted into strange, muted shades, and faint, glowing symbols appeared along the walls of the lot, tracing intricate, otherworldly patterns. You're in the first phase, Finn said, his voice close to her ear, though he hadn't moved. A realm that mirrors ours but exists just out of reach. Some people call it the shadow plane. Nora's gaze darted around, taking in the alien beauty of the place. It's incredible, she whispered, her voice echoing strangely. Careful, Finn warned. This is only the first layer. The deeper phases hold more secrets but also more danger. It's easy to get lost if you go too far. Despite his caution, Nora's curiosity had taken hold. She reached out, her fingers tracing one of the glowing symbols. A jolt of energy shot through her, making her hand tingle. Finn grabbed her arm, his grip firm. You have to be careful. Some symbols are marks of entry points, places where creatures from deeper phases have crossed over. If you activate one, it could pull you into another phase. Nora pulled her hand back, heart racing. So, the symbols are like doorways? Exactly, Finn said, letting go of her arm. Doorways for those who know how to use them. And traps for those who don't. Just as he finished speaking, a strange noise broke the silence. It was a low, rumbling sound, like a growl but distorted, echoing through the strange dimension. Finn stiffened, his eyes scanning their surroundings. We need to leave. Now. Panic surged through Nora as the air around them thickened even more, vibrating with an unseen presence. She felt something watching them, its gaze heavy and intense. Hold my hand, Finn said urgently. Focus on our world, on something real. Picture it in your mind and pull yourself back. Nora grabbed his hand, focusing on her own room at home, on the smell of her bedspread, the feel of her worn-out sneakers. Slowly, the strange colors faded, and the symbols around them dimmed until they were back in the normal world, the night air cool and clear. What was that? She gasped, her heart still pounding. One of them, Finn said grimly. They're drawn to the energy of travelers. They can sense it, like blood in the water. That's why you have to learn control. You can't keep crossing phases without knowing how to protect yourself. Nora nodded, the gravity of his words sinking in. She was in a world of secrets and dangers she barely understood, but the allure of it all was impossible to ignore. The night felt colder after their return, and the shadows around them seemed to stretch longer, as though the veil between phases had thinned. Finn, Nora whispered, trying to keep her voice steady, what happens if they catch you? He didn't answer right away, his gaze fixed somewhere far off. Finally, he turned to her, his face shadowed. I don't know. No one does. But there are stories about people who've disappeared, travelers who phased out of reality and never came back. Sometimes, people hear them, their voices echoing in thin places, crying out from wherever they are. The weight of his words pressed down on her, chilling her. Why are you doing this, then? Why keep crossing over? Finn's expression softened, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his guarded facade. I'm looking for someone, he said simply. My sister. She disappeared 3 years ago. She used to be like you, a natural traveler. I thought she was dead, but then I started seeing signs. Symbols she left behind, hints that she's still out there, somewhere in the deeper phases. Nora felt a pang of sympathy, imagining the fear and loss he must have felt. You think she's trapped in one of the phases? He nodded. If there's any chance she's still alive, I have to find her. And if anyone can help me, it's someone like you. The weight of his words settled heavily on Nora's shoulders. She wanted to help him, but the danger was undeniable. And yet, a part of her felt like this was exactly where she was meant to be. For the first time, she felt that her strange ability had a purpose. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "I'll help you." Finn's relief was palpable, a flicker of gratitude passing through his eyes. "We'll need to go further into the phases, deeper than we went tonight. I'll teach you how to control the shifts, how to handle whatever we might face. But Nora, there's no turning back. Once we start, we'll both be marked. They'll be looking for us." She nodded, determination overtaking her fear. "I understand. I'm ready." Over the next few weeks, they met each night, and Finn guided her through the intricacies of phase travel. She learned how to feel the subtle shifts in energy, to tune into the strange vibrations that signaled a doorway. He taught her how to block out the traces she left behind, masking her presence from the entities lurking in the shadows. Each new phase was more alien than the last, the landscape strange and distorted, as if they'd been sketched from dreams. Nora felt the tug of those dimensions, their pull growing stronger the deeper she went, as though something was calling her, beckoning her further. And then, one night, they stumbled across a symbol that made Finn go still, his face pale. It was the same symbol that his sister had once drawn on the wall of her room, the only clue he'd found after her disappearance. "This is it," he whispered, his voice a mix of fear and hope. "She's close." The symbol pulsed faintly, and Nora could feel its energy, a powerful force that seemed to vibrate in her bones. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above it. Finn grabbed her wrist. "Wait. There's no telling what could be on the other side." "We came this far, didn't we?" she replied, trying to mask her own fear. Taking a deep breath, she touched the symbol, and the world shifted violently around them. They were pulled into the next phase, the air thick with an oppressive energy that pressed against her chest. The landscape was different, darker, with shadows that moved like living creatures. They took cautious steps, scanning the area for any sign of Finn's sister. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the cymbals that marked the ground, pulsing in rhythm. And then, a faint voice echoed through the air. "Finn." He froze, his eyes wide with recognition. "Lily?" The voice grew stronger, calling his name again. It was faint, as if coming from a great distance, but unmistakably familiar. Finn's face lit up with hope, and he began moving faster, following the sound. "Wait!" Nora hissed, grabbing his arm. It could be a trap. But he shook her off, desperation evident in his gaze. "I know her voice, Nora. She's here. I can't leave her." Reluctantly, Nora followed, her senses on high alert. The voice led them deeper into the shadows, and the air grew colder, the darkness thickening around them. She felt a presence watching them, something lurking just out of sight. And then, they saw her. A figure stood in the distance, her form flickering like a mirage. It was a girl, her hair falling in waves around her face, her eyes wide with fear. "Lily!" Finn called out, his voice choked with emotion. The figure turned, her gaze locking onto them. For a moment, she looked relieved, but then her expression changed to one of horror. "No, you shouldn't be here." The air grew tense, and Nora felt an overwhelming sense of dread. "Finn, something's wrong." But he was already moving toward her, his face lit with relief. "Lily, it's me. I'm here to take you home." She shook her head, stepping back. "You have to leave, Finn. It's not safe. They'll find you." "Who?" Nora demanded, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Who will find us?" Lily's gaze flicked to Nora, her eyes filled with terror. "The Watchers. They guard this phase. No one is supposed to cross here. If they find you." As if on cue, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the air. The shadows around them began to shift, coalescing into dark figures with eyes that glowed faintly. They moved with an eerie, predatory grace, their gaze fixed on the intruders. "Run!" Lily screamed, her voice tinged with desperation. Finn hesitated, torn between his desire to save his sister and the need to escape. But Nora grabbed his arm, pulling him back. We have to go, Finn. Now. With a final, anguished look at his sister, he allowed Nora to pull him away. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the silence, the watchers closing in behind them. The air grew heavier, making it harder to move, as if the phase itself was trying to trap them. Focus on our world. Nora shouted, her voice barely audible over the sound of their pounding hearts. Picture it in your mind, just like we practiced. Finn nodded, his face etched with despair, but he followed her lead, focusing on the familiar sights and sounds of their reality. The world around them began to blur, the oppressive darkness fading as they phased back. They collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, the cool night air a welcome relief. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of what they'd just experienced settling over them. Finally, Finn broke the silence, his voice hoarse. She's alive, but she's trapped. Nora placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. We'll find a way to get her back. But first, we need to be stronger. We need to understand what we're dealing with. He nodded, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. Then we'll keep going. Whatever it takes, I'm not leaving her there. As they walked away from the lot, a sense of purpose filled them both. They knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready. They would face whatever darkness lay in the phases, together. The next few days blurred together as Nora and Finn threw themselves into preparation, honing their abilities with a single-minded intensity. Nora practiced her phasing, spending hours learning to control her transitions with precision. The more she practiced, the more she realized how powerful her abilities were. She could feel the energy of each phase, the subtle vibrations that marked the boundaries between dimensions. Finn was relentless, pushing her to test her limits, to delve deeper and hold her focus even when her instincts screamed to turn back. At times, his desperation bordered on obsession, but Nora understood, she felt his urgency too. The image of Lily, trapped in that shadowed phase, haunted her, a reminder of what was at stake. One night, as they prepared for another journey, Finn showed her something new, a small, intricately carved pendant with strange symbols etched into its surface. What's this? Nora asked, examining the pendant. It hummed faintly, pulsing with an energy that felt both familiar and foreign. It's an anchor, Finn explained. Travelers used to wear these to help them stay grounded, to tether them to our world. It was passed down to me by my family. My sister wore it before she disappeared. He hesitated, then pressed the pendant into her hand. You should wear it. It'll keep you safe. Nora felt a surge of gratitude and slipped it around her neck, the pendant settling against her skin like a reassuring weight. The warmth of it calmed her nerves, a steady reminder of her connection to this world. That night, they crossed into a deeper phase, one that pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy. The landscape was surreal, a distorted version of reality where colors bled into one another, and the sky twisted in unnatural patterns. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, and the air was thick with a tension that made her skin prickle. Stay close, Finn warned, his gaze scanning their surroundings. They moved cautiously, each step bringing them deeper into the phase. Nora could feel the energy shifting around them, a subtle warning of the presence that lurked in the shadows. She reached out, her senses stretching, trying to locate any signs of Lily. And then she felt it, a faint, pulsing energy, a trace of the same symbol she'd seen before. This way, she whispered, leading Finn through the twisted landscape. The symbol grew stronger as they moved, its energy resonating with her own, guiding her like a beacon. Finally, they reached a clearing, and there, etched into the ground, was the symbol, a spiral that pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. This is it, Finn breathed, his voice filled with hope and dread. He knelt beside the symbol, tracing it with his fingers, his face a mixture of longing and determination. Lily was here. But as they stood there, the atmosphere shifted, growing colder, darker. Nora's instincts flared, warning her of a presence approaching. Finn, we need to move, she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. He looked up, his gaze conflicted, but he nodded, stepping back. Let's go. They turned to leave, but as they moved away from the symbol, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. Nora's heart pounded as she recognized it, the Watchers had found them. Run, she shouted, grabbing Finn's arm and pulling him back the way they came. The Watcher moved with unnatural speed, it stepped silent, its gaze fixed on them with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. They ran, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, the twisted landscape blurring around them as they fled. But no matter how fast they ran, the Watcher closed the distance, its presence pressing against them, a dark, suffocating force that made it hard to breathe. Just as Nora felt her strength waning, she remembered the pendant around her neck. She grasped it tightly, focusing on the energy within, letting it anchor her. She felt a surge of power, a connection to her world, a tether that held her steady. With a final burst of energy, she pulled Finn with her, phasing back into their reality just as the Watcher reached for them. They stumbled back into the empty lot, gasping for breath, the weight of the other phase lifting as they returned to safety. For a long moment, they just lay there, catching their breath, the reality of what had just happened settling over them. "We're getting close," Finn said, his voice filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Lily's out there." "I know it." Nora looked at him, her gaze steady. "We'll find her, Finn. No matter what it takes." As they walked back to their homes that night, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Watcher had somehow crossed into their reality, lurking in the shadows. She glanced over her shoulder, but the lot was empty, silent, as if nothing had happened. But she knew better. The boundaries between the phases were thinning, and the Watchers would be waiting for them. The following days passed in a haze of training, strategizing, and quiet determination. Finn and Nora became inseparable, their bond deepening with each shared glance, every cautious venture into the shadowed phases. They studied the Watchers' patterns, piecing together fragments of encounters, learning to sense their presence, and honing their instincts to act swiftly if confronted. Nora's skill with phasing grew stronger with each attempt. She could sense subtle shifts between realms, navigate the thick air, and discern between the Watcher's whispers and the natural silence of each phase. The pendant Finn had given her became her lifeline, a tangible link to her reality whenever she felt herself slipping too far from safety. One evening, they decided to attempt another crossing, one they hoped would bring them closer to finding Lily. The air was charged with electricity as they slipped through the threshold, entering a deeper, darker phase than they had ever explored. In this realm, the landscape was shrouded in mist, colors muted, shapes half seen as if they floated between solid and intangible. Every sound seemed muffled, and the only audible noise was their breaths, shallow and strained. "I think we're getting close," Finn murmured, his voice trembling with anticipation. Nora nodded, focusing her energy on maintaining control, grounding herself with the pendant as they pressed forward. They hadn't gone far when they stumbled upon another clearing, one that bore faint markings similar to those on the pendant, scattered around in a circular pattern. Suddenly, Nora felt an intense pull, as if the ground itself was reaching out, begging her to phase even deeper. "Something's here," she whispered. "I can feel it." As if in response, a figure appeared through the mist. It was a young woman, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear, Lily. She seemed suspended between dimensions, flickering like a flame. She looked at them, eyes filled with both recognition and sorrow. Finn took a step forward. "Lily," he choked, reaching out as if to touch her, but his hand passed through her form, his fingers brushing against empty air. Lily's voice was barely a whisper, a soft echo as she spoke. "Finn. I'm here, but I'm trapped. They're keeping me here, in the spaces between. If you come any closer, they'll take you too." "No." Finn said, his voice breaking. "We're here to take you home, Lily. We'll fight them. We'll find a way." Nora felt the weight of the Watchers closing in. Shadows drifted through the mist, their figures shifting, nearly indistinguishable from the dark fog. Their whispering grew louder, an unsettling symphony of voices that made her stomach twist. But Lily looked directly at Nora, as if she could sense Nora's strength, her growing control over phasing. "You're stronger than they are, Nora," Lily whispered. "You can navigate the spaces between. But you have to be careful, or they'll bind you here." Nora nodded, clenching the pendant tighter, feeling its warmth radiate through her. "How do we get you out?" she asked, her voice steady. Lily's gaze softened. "It's dangerous, Nora. You'll have to confront them directly, but there's something in the center of their realm, a source of their power. If you can destroy it, the bindings that keep me here will break. But once you enter, there's no turning back. The realm will collapse, and you'll have only moments to escape." Nora looked at Finn, and he met her gaze with a mixture of fear and determination. "We have to try," he said. "I can't leave her here." Steeling herself, Nora nodded, and together they plunged deeper into the phase, Lily's flickering image vanishing as they pushed forward. The watchers closed in around them, their forms melding with the mist, their whispers now a constant, ominous hum. But Nora held on to her focus, the pendant guiding her like a beacon as they ventured into the heart of the realm. At the center, they found it, a towering, pulsing obelisk, dark and foreboding, radiating an energy so intense it seemed to warp the air around it. The watchers circled it like sentries, their gazes fixed on the obelisk, as if it were the source of their very existence. Nora took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of strength within her. She reached out, her hand tingling as she felt the energy of the pendant resonate with the obelisk. With a fierce determination, she focused on the pendant, channeling its power as she reached out and touched the obelisk's surface. The reaction was immediate. A shockwave of energy erupted from the obelisk, its dark surface cracking, fissures spreading like veins of light as it began to break apart. The watchers let out an agonized wail, their forms flickering, losing their solidity as the power sustaining them began to crumble. "Nora!" Finn shouted, grabbing her arm as the realm around them started to disintegrate. The mist swirled violently, the ground beneath them shifting, collapsing as the very fabric of the phase began to unravel. They ran, navigating the collapsing realm as shadows and light twisted around them, the watchers' forms fading into nothingness. Nora clutched the pendant, using its power to keep them anchored as they raced toward the threshold, each step bringing them closer to escape. Just as the last remnants of the realm began to disintegrate, they crossed the boundary, phasing back into their own world. They stumbled into the empty lot, breathless and disoriented, the silence almost deafening in contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Finn's gaze darted around, searching, and then he froze. Standing before them, solid and real, was Lily. Her face was streaked with tears, but she smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude and relief. "You did it," she whispered, embracing them both. As they stood together, the weight of the ordeal settled over them, a shared understanding of the journey they had survived. They had faced their fears, navigated the unknown, and emerged victorious. In the days that followed, Nora, Finn, and Lily became inseparable, their bond forged in the fires of their shared struggle. They knew they had been changed forever, marked by their journey between realms, but they also knew they were stronger for it. Their story became a reminder of resilience, a testament to the power of courage and friendship in the face of the unknown. And though the watchers were gone, Nora kept the pendant close, a reminder of the journey, and of the strength within her that she had discovered in the hidden dimensions beyond her world. As the weeks went by, Nora found herself grappling with the return to normalcy. The strange events they'd survived had left an indelible mark on her, one she couldn't shake. Even mundane sights, a patch of fog, a shadow stretching across the ground, stirred memories of the dark, otherworldly realm they had escaped. Finn and Lily seemed to be adjusting better. Lily, though visibly changed by her experience, was embracing life with a fresh perspective, finding joy in small things that she had previously taken for granted. Finn, too, was more at ease, as though his brush with losing his sister had reminded him of the fragility of their world and the strength they'd uncovered within themselves. But for Nora, the line between her reality and the other phases still felt blurred. She would feel, at times, the pull of that realm, as if it were calling her back, whispering of mysteries yet unresolved. Every now and then, she would glimpse a shimmer at the edge of her vision or feel an odd shift in the air around her. She clung to the pendant Finn had given her, which now felt more like an anchor than ever. One evening, as she stood on the rooftop where her journey had first begun, she let the pendant dangle from her hand, watching it catch the fading sunlight. The world around her seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. Then, she felt it, the softest pull, a subtle shift that she knew all too well. The phase was calling again. Nora took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew she had the strength to resist, to pull back from the edge. But she also knew that her journey into those hidden dimensions had awakened something within her. A part of her was drawn to the unknown, to the vast, unseen mysteries of existence. And as she stood there, she made a decision. She wouldn't go back, at least, not yet. But she would keep searching, not for another realm to save or another mystery to unravel, but to understand herself, to make peace with the part of her that could navigate worlds beyond the one she knew. With a final look out over the city, she slipped the pendant back into her pocket. For now, she would live in her reality, embracing the life she'd fought so hard to protect, while always keeping an eye out for the spaces between, the hidden dimensions that whispered of worlds unseen. Her journey was far from over. But she was ready to face whatever mysteries awaited her next, knowing she had the strength, the courage, and the friends to stand by her side through whatever came next. It was a quiet evening when Nora found herself again drawn to the rooftop, the place that had become her silent sanctuary. The pendant lay cool against her chest, a tangible reminder of the phases she had navigated and the world she had glimpsed. Tonight, the sky was clear, and the stars twinkled with a clarity that was almost otherworldly, as if to remind her of the boundless mysteries that lay both within and beyond her world. Finn's voice startled her, breaking her out of her thoughts. "Can't sleep?" Nora turned, finding him standing beside her. He looked at her, his gaze calm but questioning, sensing the unease that had been stirring within her. She nodded, unable to put into words the feelings she had been wrestling with since their return. "Do you think it's truly over?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Finn was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe the phases are a part of us now, not something we leave behind. We've seen things most people wouldn't even believe existed." The weight of his words hung in the air, but it was a comforting thought. What they'd experienced might never fully leave them, but they had the power to choose how it shaped them. Lily joined them, her steps light but steady. She held a notebook close to her chest, a collection of sketches she had drawn of the other worlds and the beings they had encountered. She looked up at the stars, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Maybe it's not about returning to normal," she said, "but about embracing what we've learned, and being open to whatever comes next." Nora felt a calm settle over her, a realization that whatever the future held, she was no longer afraid. Together, they stood under the vast, unending sky, knowing that no matter what worlds or dimensions lay ahead, they were ready. And so, as the stars sparkled above, they embraced the unknown, finding strength in each other and in the mysteries that had become a part of them. The journey would continue, but for tonight, they were at peace, ready for whatever came next. They stood there in silence, letting the stillness of the night wrap around them. Each of them felt the vastness of what they had gone through settle deeply within, like echoes of another world embedded in their bones. The pendant on Nora's neck began to warm subtly, almost as if it were alive, resonating with some hidden force. She glanced down at it, feeling that familiar tug of mystery. "Look," she whispered, drawing the other's attention. The pendant, which had been a steady silver, started to emit a soft, pulsing glow, brighter than they'd ever seen before. The three of them watched in awe, barely daring to breathe. It was Lily who voiced what they were all thinking. "Maybe it's showing us that there's still more." Finn's eyes sparkled, his curiosity lighting up as he leaned in closer. "If we go back, we go together. No one faces it alone this time." Nora nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They had been through the unimaginable, but the thought of uncovering even more secrets made her feel alive in a way she had never felt before. "I think I'm ready," she whispered, her hand tightening around the pendant. The pendant pulsed stronger in Nora's hand, as if in response to her decision. She took a deep breath, looking from Finn to Lily, feeling the gravity of what they'd been through and the bond they'd formed. She didn't have to speak her fears or her hopes, they all understood. Their hands instinctively came together, each gripping the pendant, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. As they stood in unison, a ripple of light encircled them. The world seemed to shift, bending and swirling around them as though they'd become untethered from the fabric of this reality. Colors blurred, sounds distorted, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, with a flash, they found themselves back in the strange dimension, surrounded by unfamiliar shapes and distant whispers, as if the universe itself was breathing around them. Nora's heart raced. This time, however, she felt none of the isolation or fear that had plagued her before. She glanced at Finn and Lily, each with their own mix of awe and determination. Their presence reminded her that she wasn't alone, not in this world nor in any other. Slowly, they walked forward, each step filled with wonder and resolve. Before them, an archway materialized, an iridescent passage into a place deeper than any dimension they'd yet seen. Together, they stepped through, ready to uncover the truths waiting in the hidden layers of existence, realizing that, whatever they found, they were changed forever, not just by what they'd seen, but by each other.